You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Hurricane Sam, the star of the show at the moment, in the Atlantic Ocean, looking extremely decent, and this imagery isn't fully up to date now, but this was the last visibles of Sam just a couple of hours ago. The storm looking extremely good on satellite imagery. Recon are into the storm now, and they're about to find out just how strong this storm is. National Hurricane Center with their latest estimate coming out at 140 miles per hour and 943 millibars. At least I think that was them. I know our analysis team came out with that. Honestly, in preparing for this live stream tonight and everything else, I haven't had a chance to look myself, but yes, National Hurricane Center are going with that right now. I assume that they expect more strengthening, and Recon may well confirm that very soon indeed. And that's probably what most of this stream will be about. But of course, it's not the only storm out there right now. We have several others in the Western Pacific. Hopefully this is the right button. It will hopefully show something that's going on over there. Ah yes, there is the rapid scan from the Himawari 8 satellite showing Typhoon Mindulle in the Philippine Sea. That is a Category 3 by our analysis right now, with winds of 120 miles per hour, and that is expected to get fairly strong as well. Both storms have a fair chance really of getting to Category 5 status, and that's something that we're going to be scrutinising over the course of the next hour or two, depending on how long we fancy staying here. And of course, as always, we'll be able to get all of your comments and questions in as we go along. So make sure you start your message with Force 13 all in text, and that will work out pretty well for us. I was going to show you my webcam just now, but it looks like it's a still image of me just sitting there. That's fantastic. Doesn't look particularly appealing, that image, but never mind. You know, we fancy, you know, personability is quite important during our live streams, but never mind. We'll just have to deal with the sounds of us. I'm joined by my team in this hour. We have with us Amethyst, Sam, Noah, and Ethan. Good evening to all of you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And the irony is that there is a Sam in the call, so I guess I might just first ask you your general thoughts on your namesake.
So I thought, haha, funny, there's going to be storm with my name. I didn't expect it to do this.
Right. And, well, that's really disappointing. The mesoscale floater has just switched from Sam to the northeast of the United States. As much as we like it up there, we want to look at Sam, but the meso floater's just changed. So I don't know if they're going to switch that to meso too. But, well, that was a recent look at Sam, the more recent imagery. Here's an infrared view. Again, I don't know why it's just switched up there, but Sam was looking very good in those images, and there it is again on the infrared. I think that's band 13, where you get a pretty good view of the cloud tops. Deeper on the south and eastern side, and a pretty deep eye as well. Who'd like to comment on its eye structure throughout the course of today?
Well, it has been practically borderline perfect. We had a very symmetric eye, and eye temperatures, I think the highest reading was somewhat of 23.4, I think was the highest reading we had so far today.
23.9, I believe.
Wow.
23.9 even. So yeah, very high eye temperature, very mature looking hurricane in the central MDR. And also the perfect symmetry of the eye was pretty impressive, and we are in an area of the Atlantic where we have somewhat of a satellite angle, so you might even expect the eye to be even a bit clearer than the 23 degrees suggests, that because earlier we had a pretty significant satellite angle with this.
Let's cross over to the imagery that Amethyst is showing us. I think the screen's taking a little while to load. Whilst we wait for that, then just another satellite perspective here showing the water vapor. Very good looking storm in those frames. For some reason this imagery's not loading for me on Amethyst's end there. So I'm not sure whether that's a problem here or over there. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we'll take your comments and questions. March 3258 has been a Category 5 member for 3 months and says keep up the great work. That's comments like that keep us going half the time. It can get tough during the peak season when we've got so many things to look at. Ethan, I think you wanted to cut in.
Yes, we've just gotten a JTWC Dvorak fix on Mindulle. They have just given it T6.0, which is equivalent to 115 knots. But interestingly, this fix was done by one of, if not the most conservative forecaster at the JTWC. And it's quite likely this is probably approaching 140, 145 miles an hour now. And it's looking pretty likely this will be a Category 5 at some point in the next 24 hours.
And once again, that's a look at Mindulle right now. I'm just trying to get some of the other imageries on that, so you might want to bear with us sometimes. We've got 2 storms to be tracking, both fairly powerful ones. If you've not heard from one of them for a few minutes, I'm sure we'll be getting on our way. A few comments and questions already coming in. What would you say is realistically the upper limit of how strong either storm could get? Category 5, I should think.
More in-depth numbers, I'd say probably for Sam, given that it's a small eye and it's just gotten out of an hour replacement cycle. Maybe if it can get there, maybe 165 miles an hour. I wouldn't say anything higher than that. But for Mindulle, the ceiling is probably 180, maybe even higher than that.
For actual mathematical, if you take the data seriously that we are having from SSTs, the absolute maximum potential for SAM should be somewhere of around 155 to 160 knots. That would be 180 to 185 miles per hour. That's the maximum potential intensity, the absolute upper echelon intensity that it can reach. MPI pressure is somewhere about 900 millibar, I think.
I would just like to note that if both of these storms ultimately do become a Category 5, which one of them, particularly the Mindulle, I'd say is quite likely, this will be the first time we will have dual Cat 5s, if it does happen, in separate basins since 2018, where we had a Typhoon Kongre and Hurricane Walaka.
Oh wow, you don't think of those ones.
And last one before that was 2005.
And here's a wider shot of the Pacific area showing where Mindulle is in relation to the Philippines predominantly, and you can just about see daylight reaching the storm now on those latest images. So ironically, because one of my satellite imagery sources for the Atlantic has stopped updating, and the other one, the mesofloat, was just shifted. Ironically, now I've got more imagery for the Western Pacific than I have for SAM. So we might need a little help there, and I still can't get Amethyst screen loading. I'm sorry about that. We'll keep trying with that. I'm sure we had lots more questions. How big is Hurricane Sam?
It's a relatively small hurricane. When you take, I think a radius of the gale force winds on the western side should be around 40 nautical miles. So far, the recon plane has now found something overly impressive in terms of winds, and it's already quite close to the core of the system. So it's a relatively small hurricane, small eye, about 50 nautical miles. But it looks to be a very intense hurricane too. And I I don't want to really comment that much on it, but I think that the recon plane might find a lot stronger winds than some of some of the more satellite-based estimates have been suggesting so far.
I mean, the first thing I think of in that regard is Irma.
To break in, Recon has just penetrated the western eye wall of Sam. We have 105 knot flight level winds, and the lowest extrapolated pressure is 942.
Hmm.
And they have just they are not in the eye, are they?
That is in the eye.
Oh, that's in the eye. Okay. Let's see.
So, as we're going along on this live stream, this information will be filtering in from the recon plane. So, as time goes on, we'll have more information on this. What does that first reading indicate then, in relation to what we've been estimating?
Indicates that it's pretty much bang on the current estimates from the NHT.
All right.
Unless the extrapolated pressure is like 10 millibars higher than it should be. It's not unreasonable for it to be a bit off in a storm of this intensity and with such a small core. Because it's gone from no gales to inside the eye in half a degree. That's like 40 miles from inside the eye to outside the tropical storm force wind radius. Quite extraordinary.
And just to remind you again, this imagery that we're looking at is a bit outdated now, but it goes to show just how well it looked a little bit earlier on, Kay. Since then, and we're still trying to get more current imagery because we're having all kinds of problems here right now. How is it looking now? In fact, we can cut to your screen.
As we go through this loop of the last 6 hours, I can honestly say that it had a better appearance around 3 hours ago and has actually degraded somewhat since. The cloud tops have warmed and it's opened a bit to the northwest. The eye has continued to gradually improve and warm since, but I'm not sure if the two exactly balance one another.
Yeah, that's a bit of a subjective call, I would say. Just building back in that last frame, though, is it?
I'm not sure what I would make of that. I would suggest that there might be some impacts from dry air, as the National Hurricane Center noted. It is in a dry environment, and with all of this sort of green outflow and then sort of just melting away, and then the inner core appearing to be partially disrupted, it would make sense if there was some dry air seeping in.
Now, the area around it, we were looking at that water vapor imagery earlier. Am I right in suggesting that there is quite a bit of dry air in the area?
That is correct.
So it's not really altogether a surprise that this is occurring. Is that what the NHC were always had in their minds when they were keeping it as a Category 3 went on their earlier forecasts?
Well, the models weren't being hugely keen on it because it's just so small. But equally, it isn't a completely favourable environment. This isn't the West Pacific in October where you've got 90% humidity and everything is pretty much as perfect as you can get here. Relative humidity is a lot lower than that, and as evidenced, it's not exploded into a higher intensity than satellite estimates indicated.
Any other thoughts from the team right now? I'm just about to get some new imagery on the storm that I can present myself.
I'm just waiting for this northeast eye will pass. And then it's only a matter of time just waiting on the drop zone, which I imagine the drop zone will find a lower pressure than what Recon's got currently, 942.
So at the update they were at 943, and decay, there's been a lot of debate today from the community at large as to whether this will become a category 5 storm as soon as they saw it strengthen like this. I guess, is this the only chance it will have right now as we're looking at it?
This is the best chance it's got. It's got 12 to 24 hours, and then it's only going to get worse from there on out.
I've just noticed something interesting on this recon pass that we've gotten. So the lowest pressure that they got was 942.1 millibars at flight level, which is where they are. But that was with very minimal winds. But just a bar before was with 64 to 83 knot winds, and that pressure was only 0.2 millibars more. So the pressure is quite likely in the 930s, to be honest.
It's a problem with storms of this size where sometimes extrapolated pressure is too high, but equally, we can't be certain until the drop zone goes down because it might be underestimating, as in going deeper than it actually is. And also, there could have been a meso vortex in the eye wall, which would result in a deeper pressure where that higher wind was measured.
We're just trying to sort this imagery out right now, showing the storm moving off towards the edge of the screen from an Africa perspective there, which of course was the storm's origin. And there's Sam right now, a fairly small system when you compare it even to the Cape Verde Islands there. Ethan?
Recon has apparently pegged the eye at 16 nautical miles wide. They're right in line with what it's been pretty consistently.
Alright. Let's take some more questions then. And thanks for your support earlier on. There was someone who sent in a comment. Something to do with noob in their name. Also, though, do you think that Sam's structure kind of reminds you guys of Lily, just a tiny bit, at least from a few hours ago? I assume 2002 Lily.
I know that some people are going to freak out when I'm saying this, but honestly, this storm's current appearance kind of reminds me to Dorian a little bit.
Oh. I'd have taken Irma. It reminds me of Irma before when they went into the storm expecting 150 miles an hour and they got 175. Although it doesn't look quite as good as that on those latest images, but a few frames ago.
Mindulle's eye is completely clear now, by the way.
Yes, it's been clearing. Let's get another look at this if we can.
Too.
There's water vapor imagery. This is back in the Philippine Sea now, so just to avoid any confusion, we're rushing around the world here to the Western Pacific.
The eye's been clearing quite rapidly because 2 hours ago, not a speck of it was visible.
Really good in those latest frames that it's starting to get that round appearance that you associate with those very strong typhoons. The problem that we'll have with Mindulle later on is that it's going to become enormous. So if it does go anywhere near Japan, the impacts could be widespread, which we'll look at the models shortly on all of that.
Yeah, JTWC do forecast the tropical storm force wind field to get a pretty significant part of Japan under it. That's their day 5 point, and of course that could go beyond that.
Yep, there's their forecast cone. That implies to me, Ethan, that it would pass fairly close to Honshu, a little bit.
We have a recon update.
Okay.
The storm has gone through the eastern eye wall. SFMR appears to have broken. But flight level was 125 knots.
So what do you mean it's broken?
At the point where the flight level is 125 knots. Oh no, it hasn't updated. Right, that
yeah,
makes more sense.
I have some additional data.
133 knot SFMRs, by the way.
Yeah. So at the same time, we have 127 knot flight level, 133 knot SFMR.
So in plain English?
Probably almost a Cat 5.
Wow.
No, Ethan.
That would be right in line with the current estimate of the NHC.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more
Pretty
because
much perfectly in line with the 120 knot.
yeah. Although I would rather lean towards SFMR, as the structure of the storm is very symmetric, mature, and then you often get mixing further down stronger winds. So I think the SFMR is closer to the actual intensity than the flight level reduction wind.
Okay, we're getting a lot of questions with regards to the actual forecast, so let's go over to Sam, who's got the models ready, I believe, showing us... Are we starting with Sam?
Yeah, sorry, give me a second.
Okay. We'll wait a second on that one as we go back to that imagery, more wider imagery, and to be honest, not as good resolution on Sam there. It's going to get awfully confusing here in the next few minutes as we're talking to Sam about Sam. Are you ready now?
I will say this.
Go ahead.
While I'm getting ready for this eastern pass, this was actually it's actually a little bit south of due east. So this is not a strongest side of the storm I will pass.
Well,
They just missed the strongest
traditionally,
part.
but the storm is moving slowly, and it has stronger convection in that part of the storm. So I wouldn't be so quick to say that it's stronger somewhere else. We need to find out for certain. But a good thing about Sam is it's so small that we will easily be able to make multiple passes. Because the plane can go from the eye to outside the storm in 10-15 minutes.
Alright, Sam, take us back to frame 1. Let's have a look. Okay, so that's the storm's progression from being born, and at some point you'll find it reaching the present day. If you should just stop it around a little bit further. That was earlier today, and there it is now, pretty much. So there's the storm out over the Atlantic, and let's go forward. So I can't see any of the Lesser Antilles there. Moving northwards. Oh, it's still going. There it is. So it just passes quite safely out to sea there from the Lesser Antilles. What's that? What was that peak pressure there? I imagine it's
950 somewhere, but I
Yeah.
can't seem to find it right now.
that's what the model has been saying for the past few runs. 950-ish, 959. And then Bermuda, I missed Bermuda on that image there. I don't know if it's the quality that makes it blends in Bermuda. There it is. So Bermuda gets tropical depression conditions, and then as we saw, obviously it goes up to Atlantic Canada, and well, if the GFS does this, then looks like Larry Part 2, Kay.
Oh, joy of joys.
But I know you've been banging the drum a bit about other possibilities.
So, well, we first of all have to mention that it's well outside the reliable range for forecasting, and it has been changing significantly day to day and will continue to change significantly over the next few days until it settles down. But there is certainly the possibility that the ridging becomes too strong over Atlantic Canada and southeast of Canada to stop the storm from going out to sea. And if that were to happen, it would then move westwards towards the United States. At what intensity, we don't know. It could dissipate before it makes it to somewhere like Maine, where the waters are quite cold, offshore. But equally, it could just stay out to sea the entire time and slowly die off like Jose did.
Oh, that would be nice.
I don't know if
Well-
anyone's had a look at the European model, but the Euro actually takes the eye wall of Sam, just about a week out from now, directly over Bermuda, the western eye wall, that is,
Oh dear.
with a pressure of 941 millibars.
God.
Goodness me. That's very impressive for the Euro.
And it's probably quite lower than that because it's not that big of a storm either when it does that either.
So that was day 7, was it?
Yes.
So Bermuda has got to be looking out for a long-range threat for the second time this year.
Although last
General
time
model
it went
can-
okay for them.
Hopefully this time it's the same.
I'm noticing, just having a look at the computer models myself here, I'm just noticing a general consensus at perhaps another intensification phase for Sam around the day 6 to 7 period as it passes Bermuda, perhaps. So maybe some intensification over there. Only time will tell for that.
Well, at some point, if it goes out to sea, it would start to undergo baroclinic forcing as it transitions to an extratropical cyclone, which is where the storm becomes very large and unusually deep for how strong its winds are. The winds back off, but still a very low pressure. But that's assuming it does go out to sea and does tap into part of the jet stream. If it doesn't go out to sea, then it will not do that as efficiently, basically, and it will weaken rather than just turning into an extratropical cyclone.
Noah has some more analysis for us, I think.
Yeah, I have the Euro app. I hope you are able to see this. So Sam is right down here in the MDR, currently steered northwestward by this very weak mid-level ridge here, and it's also why the storm is moving so slowly. We don't have a lot of strong flow coming from the northeast at the low levels or the mid levels. We have a very weak ridge here, and even low pressure anomalies here to the northeast of the storm.
Is that
So it's gonna-
Odette?
XO depth should be somewhere here, yeah. So we move this out. The ridging is not enough to keep the storm towards the south. It moves northwest of the islands, and then we have a pretty complicated
Very.
evolution. We have this trough weakness in the flow, general weakness in the flow here, middle of a ridge, centered right here, and a big ridge over Canada. And when you have these kinds of configurations, you could have this weakness. As we see here, the isobars go a bit like this. So it could cut off, which it eventually even does. So when you have cutoff lows, they can have some really unpredictable and freaky interactions with tropical cyclones. because when you cut off the westerly flow above, you have a lot of south and southeasterly steering influence on the storm, which could pivot the storm around the low.
Oh God.
And so, in these types of interactions, the low and the TC are trying to pivot around each other, but there's still a upper level westerly jet here. So the storm, at least in this run, actually follows more the westerlies and then gets caught up, as you can see here in the isobars. The flow is a bit like this. It's caught up in the westerly flow and does not hit land. And these kinds of interactions are really difficult to predict. And we have a lot of options completely out of sea and into Canada. Those are the most likely ones at this stage. As when you have cutoff flow, yeah, it tries to pivot around each other. We could be looking at the GFS now, so keep in mind this is a lot of time out. So yeah, here we have the same synoptic situation on the GFS. This is about 4 days out. Storm northeast of the Lesser Antilles, big mid-level ridge here. Trough, pretty intense, actually a bit deeper trough than on the Euro, and this huge ridge over the central United States and Canada. And here we actually see somewhat more of this interaction of the cutoff trough, or cutoff low now, and the TC, which is here, as it tries to kind of move the TC around the upper low, or mid-level low, and it actually imparts a lot of southerly and southeasterly steering influence on the storm, which takes the storm right into Canada.
Yeah. And that would be another significant impact right there.
Yeah, usually when you have this kind of look,
We have the center drop.
Okay.
Oh,
The center
Well,
drop
fixed.
is 944 millibars.
I don't mean to alarm anyone when I say this, but we've just gotten a update from ADT on Typhoon Mindulle. Raw numbers. The raw value is now 7.1. And it did get the center. And that's Cat 5. So
On
certainly,
ADT,
Mm-hmm.
Joy
Right in the
of
center.
joys. Wow, look at
With
it
an-
go in the last few hours there. This is Mindulle now in the Western Pacific again. We're swapping between them quite quickly and rapidly there to show you both stories. But there's Mindulle, and it's still fairly ragged for my liking, but I can see how ADT might have got that.
Yeah, certainly raw readings, but at this point, I'd say it's quite likely this will be a Category 5 in the next
Well-
24 hours.
we can very safely say it's a Category 4 again.
Yep.
And let's
Not
see.
exactly sure what to do with it.
See if we can go to the other imagery. Not, oh, there it is. The rapid water vapor imagery showing the progression there. Eye looks less deep on that imagery for some reason. Noah, was that everything?
I think I just wanted to show the Euro ensembles. This is the new ensemble. You can see that the ensembles are hopelessly behind with the storm's intensity, as they're all these green colors and yellow colors, which indicate 40 or 50 or 60 knot winds. But you can see a pretty significant model consensus that the Lesser Antilles won't have direct impacts from the core of the system. Every member takes it northeast of the islands, and every member curves it out to sea, except for this one, which takes it right into New England, but we just ignore this one. This is one member out of 50.
Well, you know exactly what the fake news channels are going to do now. That one ensemble.
Some members take it off to Atlantic Canada, and Bermuda is right here. So Bermuda
Yeah.
seems to be right in the line of fire.
Yeah, not great on that ECMWF spread there. I want to
And
take a look.
The African wave. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to take a look at the wider picture of my model graphics here, since the satellite isn't working on these. So obviously we know the story really with Sam, but there's another graphical depiction showing its progress there. Oops, I've just shrunk it. I didn't mean to do that. There it is. So Sam moving up there, and then obviously affecting the Canadian Maritimes. So behind this, GFS now wants 2 systems in the Eastern Atlantic. One is definitely a tropical storm, this one on the eastern part, and this one here wants to be. So it's the Atlantic, so let's assume that they both get to tropical storm status. That's V and W, and if we go to the extreme long range and don't take any credence to this one at all, but there is a little tropical cyclone that forms near Cuba there. I think it is, for a brief period. That's extremely long range, October 8th, 9th. That would be the first name on the auxiliary naming list when we get that far, which I'm pretty sure we will next month. Just throwing it to the Western Pacific, showing you the forecast for Mindulle right now. Look how much it grows in the next 48 hours. That is massive growth there, starting now and continuing until the 28th, and then really strong still as it moves through there. This is the GFS model, which usually quite substantially, oh, it's just gone, quite substantially undervalues the peak intensity, but in there, 141 miles an hour, and that's after its supposed peak, I think. As it moves on, huge thing headed towards the Japanese coast, and then pushes through there. Still typhoon equivalent, and still looks tropical actually there at this point, east of Honshu and east of Hokkaido, and it must turn post-tropical around here, and then it just shovels right through into the it's the Barents Sea up there, isn't it, towards Alaska. And it's massive beyond that point. And later on in the model run we have some more activity, but again, that's very far out. I'm sure that kind of thing could happen, but we don't want to say so at this point. And then you've got Gulab, which regretfully we won't get to mention much during this live stream. It's a tropical storm there in the Indian Ocean, in the Bay of Bengal. There's the expected landfall. Looks like it weakens a bit as it does so. Landfall will be in Odisha, near Srikakulam, I think it's called, north of Visakhapatnam on the eastern coast of India, and that will be tomorrow. And also a few hints from the GFS model that this storm will actually survive the passage over India and regenerate in the Arabian Sea. I've no idea what's going on in Morkay.
It is rather unusual.
So that's...
But equally,
yeah.
we're just at the end of monsoon season. It's as moist as it's going to get over India, and it is one of the places where you see storms overland.
Well, that's a rundown of the world models anyway. Let's see if we have some questions right now. Did the GFS run show Hone forming? I did have a brief look at that just as I cut away. There is a tropical storm strength thingy, but it doesn't look like it gets the center of circulation. So, no. You can send in your questions, start your message, Force 13, all in text. Any news from Recon right now?
Recon are moving out, repositioning, deciding where they're going to come in next. No particularly insightful information unless the Vortex data message has come out.
I believe so. You want to have a look?
Oh, I will have a look for you. I was just having a more in-depth look at the data, and it supports 120 to 125 knots based on the eastern eyewall readings. So yes, we do have the vortex data message. I'm just bringing it up now. There we go.
On your screen?
Yep.
Oh, just a moment. Got to get back to that now. And we are currently... Oh, there it is. We can barely read that anyway, Kay. Ah. Thanks for your help.
There we go.
So which
So-
lines are we looking at in particular there? Anything of note?
Well, this is the current time on the first line. That's the position they fixed it at. So, about the same latitude that Ivan and Matthew became Category 5s in the Caribbean. So that just shows you how much different the favorability is between outside the Caribbean and inside. There wasn't a lot to separate this storm from those storms, except perhaps it's even smaller, which might have made it more susceptible to the dry air.
Is that an eye diameter of 9 nautical miles?
That is an eye diameter of 9 nautical miles, or 10 to 11 regular miles.
That's much smaller than what they said earlier, isn't it?
They said 10 to 15,
Right.
and they went with 15 for the forecast advisory, being conservative as you always should. But that is very impressive and fairly close to pinhole status. It wouldn't have to be much smaller to be a pinhole. As you can see, the pressure was 945 with 9 knots of winds, which you would generally take 1 millibar off for to give 944. 742 miles from Barbados. So quite a ways out to sea right now.
Yes, and no cloud coverage over any of those islands to do with the storm. And that should remain the case for... I mean, this thing's going to be moving... Like, you look at the National Hurricane Center forecast. Pretty sluggish movement for the next 5 days, and it's very uniform. All those M's in a line on their forecast.
Yes. Has that been up on stream yet?
Yes, we've showed it a few times. Here it is now. And we're just switching to star imagery here now as well to show you another view of how the storm's progressed recently.
So
And yeah,
the cone does show that it's actually going to start accelerating towards the end of the 4 to 5 day period. But right now it's basically stuck in slack flow. The only thing that's moving it along is the trades, and they're pretty much at their weakest at this time of year.
so Recon are currently investigating the storm. We're covering both Sam and Mindulle right now on either sides of the planet, and we'll take some more questions here. I'm just trying to find some thoughts on the structure of Sam. We haven't looked at any microwave imagery yet. So I don't know if you want to see if you can grab any of that. Another question, do we think the Cat 5 chance will go up after the GFS update? We've got our Category 5 chances pegged at 20%, which some people have said are pretty low, but those kinds of things you don't really do lightly, considering how rare it is for a Category 5 to actually happen outside of the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico.
Also this far east, the only storm in the main development region, which is south of 20 North, that has become a Category 5 outside the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, is Irma and Hugo. And then you're really looking at earlier ones with less reliable records. obviously there's Lorenzo, which happened outside the main development region, 24 north, if you're going by official numbers anyway.
You know how I
Um,
feel on that.
Maria was another one, but that happened right as it was entering the Caribbean.
Yep.
And quite a few people say Jose was a Category 5 in between the recon missions. NHC extrapolated linearly, which is reasonable enough. It's not outrageous, but some people say that the satellite appearance improved enough to show that it must have been strengthening and place 140 knots about halfway between the two passes. It was a fair recon gap, but we're not here to talk about Jose. Looking at Sam on infrared, you can see more recent frames, a significant burst of cloud from the southwestern quadrant that's already wrapped around the small eye to the northeast side.
And the eye has shrunk there.
Contracted slightly, yes. Now, the quickest way for this to get to Category 5, if it wanted to do that, would be to contract the eye to a half of its size without going through an eye replacement cycle. And just by doing that, as long as the cloud tops and eye wall updraft intensity sustained, by reducing the size by half, you're turning the same amount of momentum into a faster spin, like when a ballet dancer pulls his or her arms in as they're spinning. It makes it rotate faster. So the pressure could only go down a little bit, but if the eye wall contracted significantly, it would put the winds up a lot. But equally, when you get to a storm of that size, you sometimes struggle to find the winds because they're so brief in terms of spatial coverage that you go through them in less than 10 seconds.
Absolutely.
And this is borderline pinhole.
A question there from Alexia. How big is Sam's tropical storm force winds and its hurricane force winds?
Well,
I'll grab that info from the National Hurricane Center, who
Yes.
say that its tropical storm force winds right now, its largest quadrant is the southeast at 90 nautical miles, and for hurricane force winds it's generally averaging out about 20 nautical miles, 25 in the northeast.
which makes sense because it's got a very compact and small eye wall.
Yeah, those sound like well, actually, considering the small, that sounds like a pretty large hurricane wind field for that. That's a third of its tropical storm wind field, which you don't usually see. I'm sure it's true, but you don't often see it taking up that proportion.
I think that's just because of how tight the gradient is and how small the storm is. It's
Absolutely.
doing more than one unusual thing, put it that way.
Unlike Mindulle, this one's not going to grow a huge amount. On day 3, is it? They only have the gale wind field at 100 nautical miles northeast. Do you think that will impact its chances, later down the line of retaining this intensity or building once again?
Well, as most people know, the smaller the storm is, the faster it can change intensity. And that works both ways. So when it weakens, it will weaken quickly. And it may well drop below major hurricane status for a time. But once it rebuilds a larger core, I would expect it to undergo some re-strengthening after it finishes weakening. Whether it weakens due to a significant dry air intrusion or an eye wall replacement cycle, it's going to get larger as it moves north, as all storms do, regardless of eye wall replacement cycles, to be quite honest. Even a hurricane that's of a low intensity and doesn't really go through a cycle will still get larger as it moves north, just because of how the changing forces with latitude impact it. There's some interesting applications of atmospheric physics that cause the storm to grow as it moves towards the North Pole or South Pole in the Southern Hemisphere.
Okay, let's see if we can take another look at Mindulle right now. And sometimes this imagery takes a little while to load here, but once we do get it, it's worth it. There is the water vapor once again, but I want to try and get that infrared just to show how this storm was built in the last few hours. Looking very good in those latest frames. Not a category 5, but it could get there tomorrow. And at this point we'll really follow what the viewers want to talk about with our imagery. So a question just now from Intrepid Explorer: will this, and talking about Sam, make landfall in the USA, and will this be a category 5? Well, they both won't happen at the same time. That's one thing we can rule out completely.
Whoa. With this being a research mission, it seems they're investigating the eye wall, and they dropped not one, not two, but 3 drop sondes inside the eastern eye wall in the space of 2 minutes. And all of them found instantaneous surface winds of 120 knots, so category 4 gusts. The strongest one found an instantaneous gust of 151 knots above the surface.
Wow.
440 meters above the surface, that is. And I'm just trying to see what that might indicate.
I wouldn't have thought it'd be anything that racy.
So the average from the lowest 150 meters is 134 knots, and there is a specific ratio that you should use for it, which is 0.84, and that gives you around 130 mile an hour at the surface, so more proof that it is a category 4.
Certainly is. But about that question earlier, whether it will reach category 5 status, first of all, I mean, that's way up in the air. Odds against, still, at this point, considering
I would
it.
agree with that.
Yep. And chances of hitting the USK, I would also say odds against, but not impossible.
It's more likely to go into Canada than the US.
Yep.
There's still a chance it goes out to sea completely. The place most likely to see impacts is Bermuda, and that should be the place paying most attention to the storm at this time. We're still well more than a week away from any potential impacts to the US and or Canada if it goes near them. Plenty of time for the track to shift to a complete miss out to sea. Plenty of time for it to shift to going into the US unavoidably.
Oh dear, we won't want
That's
that.
why the NHC only forecasts out to 5 days. We can't say what it's going to do at 10 days out.
And the cone, as we always mention, is there for a reason. The center of the storm can pass anywhere within the edges of that cone, and on some rare occasions even outside the edges of that cone.
Well, not that rare. The storm will go outside the cone 1/3 of the time, according to the NHC's own statistic.
It looks like quite a large cone right now, though, for their standards recently. That they've been narrowing down their cones a lot.
I think part of that will be the uncertainty with the small size. Because small size prone to more rapid changes in intensity, and intensity also affects the track it takes.
Although it would be a weaker one that goes more west usually.
Yes. So, still looking fine for the Lesser Antilles.
Hidden Amethyst has sent us a message of support. Thank you very much. They were here at the beginning of the stream. Says it looks that recently in Sam that there was a convection burst in the northwestern eye wall, as well as a convection burst originating from the southern eye wall is about to finish a trip around the eye.
I can't see anything about a new burst in the northeast unless the mesosector has returned and I am not aware of it. Because that would give more up-to-date imagery, obviously.
No, we don't have the mesosector.
So, yeah, the burst from the southwest is still going round, but it's only halfway round at this time. It's still got a ways to go before it links up again. Oh, I am just seeing the smallest hint of something in the very last frame in the northwest, but it equally, it's not got to the point where we know it's going to be a significant burst. It might just be a little boop, and then it falls back down again. So we'll have to wait for a couple more updates.
Just gonna see what this is doing. Okay, looks like I've lost another satellite imagery source. Gee, things are going well today.
Recon.
Yep.
Recon is heading for the center, and in about 6 minutes we'll be in the eye of the storm.
All right. Looking forward to hearing from that then. More questions just now. Could Hurricane Sam eventually make landfall in New England? There was that one ECMWF ensemble. Let me check GFS ensembles to get
That's a
another
good idea.
idea on this. But one ECMWF so far, so that's probably about 5% at most.
Oh, that's 1 out of 52. So.
Oh, is it? So it's less than that then.
Yeah, that's 2%.
And the GFS ensembles right now, it hasn't fully come out yet, but I can't see anything going to New England there because the most easterly one is just making landfall in Bermuda. Although some ensemble members are lagging the storm, so it has more time south of Bermuda, so I don't know yet.
I have to see what it does when it finishes coming out.
Let's
what
go
does the
back.
run before say,
Yeah,
Nathan?
we'll just go
What's the
back
earlier
to that
do?
one. And the furthest west one went just west of Bermuda, so yeah, no, nothing.
And then where did it go beyond that?
Northeast, in fact, east, and then way out to sea.
Huh. So did any of the long range, unreliable, but still they were, worth just taking a note of? So all of them went out to sea?
No, the 12Z, I would say about half of them hit Atlantic Canada.
That's obviously a massive shift from what we were looking at a couple of days ago. Bearing in mind this is all 10 days to 2 weeks out and should be taken with
It's not.
a small bucket load of salt.
The landfall in Canada could occur, according to the quickest ensembles, on day 7.
That is very quick, but I was more referring to the trend over time starting as it was 2 weeks out.
Right.
The earliest indications were that the Euro wanted the storm to just pretty much go due northwest until it hit South Carolina, and it's definitely not going anywhere near the southeast US at this point. We can say with 100% certainty it's not going to the Carolinas or Georgia, but that's where almost everything was taking it at the start. And then they started sending it towards the New York, New Jersey area, and it's looking rather unlikely it'll go there now. And they just keep shifting northwards and eastwards along the coast, and it seems reasonable they might end up staying out to sea.
Knowing this year so far, Kay, there'll just be another storm that pops up in the Caribbean and does it instead.
Oh yes, we've got the joys of the second season in the Caribbean to look forward to.
Ah, dear. Let's see, more questions here. The JTWC has been forecasting a super typhoon out of Mindulle, but as of the latest update, it weakened a bit. And what are our thoughts on its future? And I think it was you that made the decision to weaken it earlier on our analysis, Kay, or one of our people.
Which storm?
Mindulle.
Mindulle. Speaking
Yeah.
of, I've just gotten an owl pass, Kay. You'll want to see this.
Oh, has the recon gone in?
This is the most recent I will pass on Mindulle.
Mindulle. I will
Yeah.
pass.
Microwave pass.
Microwave.
Okay.
Goodness gracious! Look at that eye wall.
That is very impressive.
Could you show it on your screen, Kay?
Ethan is screen sharing it right now.
Oh, let's just try and get this quickly. You're looking at Mindulle on satellite imagery there, and this is what Ethan's showing. Wow.
That from the western side all the way around to the northeastern side, or on the southern side. That is a very, very strong eye wall.
Certainly an intensifying eye wall, I would suggest.
And let me just pull up how the storm looks right now. This is how it looks right now.
Crikey. So, a good chunk of minus 80-degree cloud tops marked in the yellows. Minus 70s everywhere. You generally get colder cloud tops in the Western Pacific, over the Atlantic, every day of the week usually. What do we think of that eye temperature though?
I'm not sure exactly what it is, but if I had to guess, I'd probably say this would be a Category 5 in earnest, probably.
Those... I can
that.
tell you what the eye temperature is roughly if you give me a couple of seconds. As unfortunately, you're not able to use Himawari to probe it for eye temperature on real Earth. It doesn't work.
Well, if it helps, I got Dvorak imagery up as well. If that helps. Of course, this is actually pretty high resolution, and here's even a daytime image of the storm right now.
Yes,
So-
we've got visible there now.
The latest
Looking good.
Dvorak imagery is OW, which stands for off-white. That's just the name of the colour. And that is minus 30 to plus 9. It looks like it's getting closer to the positives. based
ADT
on
pegging
shading.
it at +3.
That is a pretty accurate way to look at the eye temperature, yeah. So just into the positives.
Yeah, the final T number is gone up slightly, but the raw T has actually gone down 0.1. And that certainly shows that
It has.
was intensifying right now. But this visible imagery, wow, what a CDO that the storm has right now. If that eye clear a little bit more, then that's gonna be quite the storm to see on satellite.
Yeah, it's sure going to be impressive. And our team will have updates all the time during this storm. Of course, we've got the tropical weather bulletin as normal in an hour's time. We're probably going to be live until that comes out pretty much. Xavier will be working hard behind the scenes once again. Let's take some more questions. What is the highest wind recon reported on the surface in miles per hour?
That would be a SFMR, which tends to overestimate at this wind speed, which was 133 knots, which goes to round about 150, 155 miles an hour. Now, I would go slightly lower and say that that was an instantaneous, well, a 10-second reading, so a bit better than instantaneous, so around 150 miles an hour when you account for the overestimation. When you put that together with the flight level winds, you get around 145 miles an hour at the surface. That's what I would throw a guess at the NHC going with.
We've got a recon update. They just got flight level winds of 139 knots, and SFMRs both of 136 knots and 134 knots.
Oh my goodness me.
That's 150 miles an hour right there.
And this is sustained or gusts?
That supports, well, so this is, we can now say with confidence that this is at least 145 miles an hour because that's what the flight level wind gives us. Where the SFMR is 155 miles an hour, and it depends how much you want to trust it. I wouldn't go with 155. not sure if I would go 150 or 145, but we can say with confidence that it is at least 145 right now.
Oh,
I would be
joy.
I would be more inclined to go with 150 just based on the flight level ones on the previous pass.
150 is the result you get when you blend the two, yes, but I don't know if you would take it at face value at this intensity or not. I'm not the expert. I haven't learned how SFMR works and all the intricacies of it. That's the NHC's job, and they will give an update in a few hours unless they want to do an update statement sooner, which they may well do with Recon in the Storm, and we'll find out at that point what they think of it.
I don't know if they will or not, but
I don't
they
think they
make more
will
information.
unless they make it a Cat 5.
I
Yep.
wouldn't expect a full advisory, but just a little update statement saying it's now 145. Just a little short message that does that, because that's what they normally do when they have Recon in and it's stronger than they say it is. They say
Maybe,
it's
but
now
I'm
this.
I'm
There
not
you go.
sure. Do they? They
They
might only
did-
do that when it's upper category, when it's out at sea.
I mean, they did upgrade Felicia from 130 to 145 in a special update.
All right.
So
Well,
I think
that's that theory gone then.
possible. But I really don't think that they will for this.
Hmm.
But I'm also hearing rumors for you, Nathan, that apparently the mesoscale imagery is back.
Oh, good. Well, that's very
That's rumor.
pleasing.
Don't know if that's for sure.
Let's see if we can have a look at it right now. And
Yes, it is. Back over the storm.
well, the
That's
problem.
excellent news if it's returned.
Yes, it just doesn't work at all here anymore now at my end.
I'm seeing it
I,
on Levi Cowan's website. It's just switched over
Let me
just
check my other source.
a few minutes ago.
I saw a comment in the chat asking about simultaneous category 5s and how many there have ever been. Now, a very famous example is 2005 when Emily and I believe Hai Tang in the Western Pacific were category 5s at the same time for, I think, half an hour.
Was
It wasn't
it?
the longest time. It was certainly not more than 6 hours. But it's very unusual to have category 5s at the same time. Normally it happens in different basins. In an El Nino year, you're quite likely to have 2 strong storms at the same time, one on either side of the Pacific, which makes 2005's Emily and Hai Tang in July, which is not a normal time for North Atlantic category 5s, all the more spectacular. But to my knowledge, there has never been 3 category 5s at the same time. And I'm not sure if there's ever been 2 at the same time in the Southern Hemisphere.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, in the same basin in the Southern Hemisphere, it's been close sometimes, hasn't it? In the Western
Yes.
Pacific, no. I'll have to. I mean, I'm the historian. I at least I brand myself that way. I'll have to take a look back. I can't think of any offhand.
So, in the most recent frames, there has been a second burst from the southwest. The first one died off, and then a second one renewed itself. So it is trying to wrap colder temperatures around. But if I pause it
Certainly is.
I pause it at the very last frame and take the warmest temperature from the northwest part of the storm, that would be minus 66, which means that it's, well, minus 66 is, just checking right now how that would affect the satellite estimates.
Okay, yeah.
So that is only B, and we were looking at a ring of white. So we've actually lost structure with regards to satellite estimates, which might suggest, potentially,
I
when
know
we
what
had
you're
the
going to
pressure,
say.
that with how small this storm was, it might have been ever so slightly deeper before the plane got in and actually weakened slightly due to some dry air. Because it was quite a significant drop in cloud tops. We had a complete ring of minus
Yeah.
70, mid minus 70s, and then it's
It,
broken.
it looked much better earlier on.
Yeah. So not that outrageous to suggest that it might have had a slightly deeper pressure before the plane got in, but 942, 944 agree pretty much perfectly with the estimates, so I'm not going to delve into that too
Yep.
much. It's
More-
just a possibility that we have to accept. We'll never know if it happened or not.
More questions, and there's get those kinds of things all the time in this field, unfortunately. So, if you're a stickler for having to know exactly what things were, then you might have a lot of stress and anxiety in this field, Kay. Hey, how many miles wide is the eye? Regarding Sam,
It was
9 miles
9 nautical miles,
nautical miles.
which is 10 to 11 regular miles.
If Sam makes landfall in Atlantic Canada, what could be the intensity? I would say a little bit weaker than Larry, from what I was seeing.
Yeah, it's not going to be as big as Larry, so it's unlikely to hold its intensity as well. And of course, Larry was very far north. It might have broken a record for being the northernmost tropical cyclone. It was certainly very close to the record holder, which I believe is Alberto of one of the seasons in the 2000s.
2000.
It was in 2000 or 2000, or maybe it was. I can't quite remember. I just know that it was.
Yeah, it's that one.
Yeah.
I don't know though. That there's a lot of older ones that on the best track files and on Herdat, it's listed as hurricanes. The one in 1971, I think it was, and some others. But when you look at satellite imagery, it's not. But it's still in Herdat.
Those are all being taken down quite significantly when reanalysis goes through. Faith was, and still is at the moment, on the best track, a hurricane until it's near Scotland.
62 north, I think it was.
Yes, and had a very merry journey under the jet stream, while supposedly being a hurricane. We have heard rumours from the reanalysis project that they're going to set it as extratropical south of Newfoundland.
Yeah. But do you think that that could actually be possible, what it supposedly did?
It's not at all possible. The
Not
amounts of,
Faith itself, but another storm in the future.
no, it's just not possible. The quarters aren't warm enough, and the wind shear goes through the roof because of the jet stream.
Sure does. More questions then. What do we think Sam will peak at? And we're left with 2 questions really right now. The one being, has it peaked? And the second being, if it does peak again, what will its peak be? Christian, we've not properly introduced you actually, so now's a good time. What are your impressions of the storm today, and how strong do you think it got?
Honestly, right now, I don't know what to think of this storm. I know that's an amazing thing to say. But yeah, unfortunately, I've been a bit out of the loop recently due to personal things, and I come back, and then, well, look at what we have here. Basically, I hope that this system has peaked. I don't know what it's doing right now. But
All right.
yeah, again, at the minute, I just don't know what to think.
Ethan? What do you think about the storm's its earlier intensity? What do you think, that was the peak, or do you think it's still yet to come? And what do you think it might get to?
Personally, I think that right now that the storm is still intensifying right now. I don't think it's peaked yet. I mean, it's got conditions that should support. Recon doesn't indicate any sort of viral replacement cycle during the next few hours or anything. I won't exactly name off any numbers for peak intensity because I'm actually working on a forecast cone that will come up at top of the hour for Sam.
Oh, right.
So, You'll have to wait and see what I forecast.
Okay then. And more questions just now. A few comments of thanks, and we always appreciate that. Just trying to find the starting point again. Tropical Storm Gulab, do we think it will strengthen into a hurricane equivalent? Very unlikely.
I personally, I doubt.
Very
It's
unlikely.
just gonna remain a sheer tropical storm, might strengthen to maybe 50 miles an hour, or I'm not sure what that is in kilometers per hour.
80.
80, yeah. So it might get towards the upper part of 70, 80 kilometers an hour, but it's not going to be that much of a wind threat. It'll just be more rain on top of everything the monsoon's already brought.
We do actually have a cone for Gulab right now from the JTWC, and they are forecasting a 50 knot peak there as it makes landfall. And they're expecting that in just 12 hours as it makes landfall there. 60 miles per hour.
What do they currently have it at?
Sorry?
What do they currently have it at?
Currently at 45 miles an hour.
So they expect gradual strengthening of 5 knots every 12 hours.
Yep.
And then landfall in a day. That's not unreasonable.
Well, I mean, we're pretty much at 26.0Z now, so we would expect, if it's going to keep up, that it will be 50 miles per hour at the next.
That is true, yes.
And then that weakening trend. But we were looking at the cone just before then of Sam once again. You can see there, if you've not seen it yet, I know someone requested it, showing the progress. And that's an incredibly old cone as well, I've just noticed. There's the new one, showing that it does get a little further on there by the end of day 5, 2 p.m. Thursday. Still, the islands of the Lesser Antilles quite clearly outside of the cone, so that's good news there. More questions. Can Odette reform or no?
Odette is long gone and will be an extratropical system for the rest of its life until it's absorbed.
Oh, is it? I think that's. I think Odette is that thing there that's. Or I don't know actually. Is it that swirl that's just past southwest of the Azores, or is it that thing with convection well south of the Azores? No,
I'm not exactly sure where it's gone.
That convection thing I think is
last-
actually Rose, isn't it? Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Odette was, last I saw, was near the Azores, but don't know what's happened to it since then.
Yeah, I think I know what's happened. The Atlantic, apart from Sam, is basically a name graveyard right now. The remnants of Peter is that little blob of convection there, well to the northeast of Federico. That little swirl you can see coming in from the very north near the Azores, that's Odette, I'm pretty sure. And well south of the Azores, that frontal looking, but partly circulation looking, but doesn't have one, is what's left of Rose.
And Teresa?
And Teresa, I didn't even follow that. I assume it's that swirl near Bermuda, is it?
It is the swirl near Bermuda, yes. It died even faster than the NHC predicted.
Yeah.
So really we have 5 traceable storms, but only one is of any note at all. But I mean, I just like tracking things for as long as possible before you can't tell them apart anymore. But there you have it. Let's see what else we have. Is Sam going to hit St. Martin? Says Toby. It's extremely unlikely for it to get anywhere near there. You should be avoiding any storm conditions there. And thought I saw another question just then. Can Sam affect the east coast of the United States?
Too early to tell, I'd say.
Well, it won't be anytime soon. We'll get a decent notice, hopefully.
Oh yeah, there will be probably more than 5 days warning if it does decide to turn towards the coast, because the ridge will have to lock itself in quite well ahead of the storm, otherwise it will just get nudged out the way and the storm will go where it wants to.
What if it's a borderline one though, where you just don't know if it's gonna
if it's
go
a
there?
borderline one, the people of Newfoundland have been through one hurricane this season. I'm sure they'll be on guard and paying close attention in case anything else comes their way.
Now, some people think that Sam is already a Category 5 hurricane.
It is
No.
definitely not a
No.
Category 5.
Definitely
No, it's
not.
not.
Recon currently suggesting. Did you say that 150 would be the upper bound?
150 is the upper bound that you would.
Why
categorise.
upper bound? Why upper
Yeah.
bound?
Based
I
on
wouldn't say
recon.
150 would be the
Based
upper
on
bound.
recon.
Why is it the upper bound? But
Because flight level
Yeah.
only supports 145, you bring it up to 150 because of the SFMR, but you can't go to 155 with flight levels not particularly in support of it,
flight level has been
especially with
136.
SFMR being overinflated at this intensity.
Yeah, that's why you just go with the middle of the flight level converted intensity and the SFMR, which is 150. So and also this recon intensity has some amount plus or minus. So 150 would actually be the consensus, not the upper bound. But okay.
Well, I think it's the consensus and the upper bound, with the lower bound being 145.
Could this season match last year for the number of storms in September?
We are on
Uh,
7 right now? I'm not quite certain.
No. Probably not. Last year we had 10, and we
Yeah.
even had 10 at September 18th.
Yeah.
And we just have a few days left in September, and we don't really have that many area of interest that are likely to form very soon and get named.
So we've had 8 named storms so far. We'd need 2 to match, and there's really only one area that's going to give a new name, and that might not even happen until October 1st, October 2nd. So I think that it's reasonable to say the season has already pulled a lot of its weird storms out of the bag for September, and it's sort of exhausted its supply.
Wait till you see October.
Well, I'm not saying anything about
Okay.
October yet. There's way too
Oh,
much
no.
uncertainty.
Please don't.
So far, we had 7 storms in September, not 8. Oh,
No,
Larry
was named at 9 o'clock on the 1st.
Oh man.
Larry formed on September
As a
31st.
depression, and it was named in September.
Were you about to say September 31st then?
Yes, he was.
Recon went through the southwest eye wall a while ago, found winds of around 100 knots at flight level, and same at the surface, so certainly strong Cat 2 winds in the southwest quadrant. That's what you'd expect for a storm moving northwest, of course. I'm just waiting for the center drop to come in. Whoa! Looking at the drop zones, there was an instantaneous gust. What level above the surface is that? There was a gust less than 300 meters above sea level to 207 miles an hour.
Beg your
That a
pardon?
drop zone recorded. 180 knots has been recorded above the surface as a gust, very clearly a gust. The wind shoots up by 31 knots, but that's a 207 mile an hour gust around 260 meters above the sea level.
People are going to go crazy over that. Kay, in perspective, what does that mean?
It means it's got some pretty significant updrafts to be gusting like that, but equally with a small storm of this intensity, you'd expect gusts to be approaching that at in the strongest part of the storm, which is obviously around 200 meters above sea level.
Super Typhoon asks, what season did the Westpac have the most Cat 5s? Most people agree that it's 1997, which was the massive El Nino year. I think 2018 wasn't far behind, though.
Was there 10
too.
Category 5s in that year?
It depends. I think I have it down as 10. Some sources would say 11.
Certainly a lot.
There's a few borderline ones, yes.
As always the case in seasons like that, you end up with storms that don't quite get there and others that go well past it.
Yeah, indeed. Let's see.
2015 was also a season that had a lot of Category 5s. At least by Force 13 analysis, I think. I think we even did 10, if I remember correctly.
My memory's like a sieve these days for our early days. Okay, let's see. Another question here. How long does it have left before it begins to weaken? I think they're talking about Sam there. It's got a while before weakening takes hold.
Sam is forecast to be a major through the next 5 days.
It is a major now.
Yeah, I'm seeing people in the comments, just because there's a high gust at the place where you'd expect a gust of this intensity doesn't make it a Category 5 at the surface. To be honest, it's more the fact that we don't sample these storms enough to find these readings. They do happen all the time, and we know they're happening. We just don't have a instrument directly observe them very often. So it's more to do with the fact that we're out here doing something that doesn't happen very often and dropping extra drops on us.
Now, if that was 200-mile-an-hour gust on the ground, that would mean something completely different, wouldn't it, Kay?
It certainly would. It certainly would, but equally, we've had higher gusts over land from a storm that wasn't a Category 5, so it wouldn't say anything. Gustav hit 211 gust over land, observed by a station, and this is out to sea, so the gusts would, be a bit lower or a bit higher. I'm not quite sure how it works.
How about the world record holder in Australia?
Oh, yes.
I think it was...
That was estimated by satellite, so we don't know if it was a Cat 5 or not. But gusts are kind of... They don't really tell you what the actual sustained winds is for the 1 minute sustained. So estimating...
If you have lots of gusts in quick succession...
If you have lots of gusts, you can do what's called a vertical wind profile. So when you have a lot of drop zones, you can actually estimate the flight level reduction and then have a better intensity estimate of the storm by using the modified flight level reduction and the flight level winds in the storm, and then get to another intensity estimate. But usually when you have just 1 or 2 gust readings, it's extraordinarily difficult to make a 1 minute sustained estimate out of those. And I wouldn't use 1 or 2 gusts to estimate a tropical cyclone's intensity. That's very
how
difficult.
the Dropton works is you take all of the gusts that it measures, and since they're all happening one after another, you put them together to get an averaged wind speed over that time it's falling, and then you work out how to reduce it from the height that all those winds are coming from, because obviously they're not at the surface, it's as it's falling down, so then you have to adjust for the fact that those winds aren't at the surface, and usually that comes out as lower than the directly observed SFMR and flight level winds, because it's very difficult to drop it perfectly in the strongest winds, because it's only a fraction of a couple of seconds when you're flying at 300, 400, 500 miles an hour in a plane several thousand feet above the ground.
Looking back at views of Mindulle again on this imagery, showing the wide shot of the Western Pacific. You can actually see Gulab on the very far left-hand side there. And we're trying to get the visible imagery up here now as well, obviously because we have daylight over there and we'd like to show that off. So we're just going to try and get rid of that, the overlay. And in a minute we'll be able to see how it looks on raw visible at a close-up angle. But Mindulle is looking very good once again. And there is the raw visible imagery, really looking very good there. The eye clearing out, a bit more clearing out needed.
Have you guys been showing the recent microwave pass over Mindulle?
Yes.
We have the new vortex data message,
Okay.
which suggests that the pressure has remained unchanged, but that the eye has broadened and is now 13 nautical miles.
What?
So clearly the storm is fluctuating.
And you're
in terms of
talking
structure.
You're talking about Sam there, just to make it clear to everyone. We're still looking at Mindulle on these images. Let's cut back to Sam. There it is.
So pressure about the same, 946 with 16 knot wind. You go 44 to 45. With the previous reading, I'd probably stay at 944. But the eye has gone up by a significant margin, which is the wrong direction if you wanted it to get stronger.
That's nice to hear. Although it still looks fairly ferocious. That's because it is. Category 4 status for Hurricane Sam. No land affected in the next 5 days, at least we don't think so. But the long-range threat is present for places like Bermuda and Atlantic Canada and possibly the US East Coast, outside chance. And in the Western Pacific, as we were looking at just a moment ago, there's Mindulle on the infrared imagery, showing that the -80 cloud tops are ending, probably because the eye is deepening and becoming clearer. And it's still building out a little bit of a weakness. Not a weakness, but a slightly less on the northern side of those cloud tops. But still well into the -70s. And back to the raw visible, which is often the most photogenic imagery. There it is once again. It looks to me as though it's actually wobbled southwest a little bit there. Looks to me like it's moving southwest very slowly, which was not part of the plan. It's supposed to be moving north. We're here for another 25 minutes before our tropical weather bulletin gets released on our channel. Xavier's covering that tonight as usual. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. This once again is imagery of Mindulle, and we cross between the two every now and again. Throwing it back to Sam now on Kay's screen, showing the infrared imagery once again and its progression.
And something you can see in the last few frames is that cloudburst firing farther away from the eye, which probably helped pull it up slightly wider and increase the size. What we can see on the infrared hasn't changed sizing much, but the distance of the coldest cloud tops from the centre has changed slightly.
Okay, that latest imagery. There's 2 black bands now on the northern side.
Let's pause it at the very end, shall we?
What's going on?
This is the old cloudburst that, if we go back, It's doing a pulsing cloudburst motion, where one burst fires, wraps about halfway around, then falls off and drifts away from the center of the storm, and then the next one comes out and does the same thing, and it's on its third cycle of that right now. But if it can't wrap all the way around the center, it won't be able to intensify any further.
No. Interesting how these storms always show different patterns at this stage of their lives. You know, you get the ones that do those where they have two banks of cloud tops that are blowing up or opposite sides of the eye. That is one of the most impressive things that I see personally.
Yes,
Can't remember what storm did it last year, but it got very strong.
That is always a very impressive thing to see.
I think it might have been Laura, actually.
You mean these two hot towers
Yeah.
simultaneously? Yeah, I remember Laura having that. Yeah, I thought that was Laura.
And we saw it earlier this year with one of the storms as well. And I always forget which one's which now. I've not got as good memory as some of the guys here. But yeah, that's one of the patterns that really tell you that it's strengthening quickly.
Indeed. Now, we can just see in the very latest frame that it appears the current burst is starting to move away from the center, and we'll see if another burst follows it.
We'll keep looking at this imagery for a while. More questions. Could SAM enlargen? It will do gradually, pretty slowly in this case by the looks of things though.
Well, the only way it's going to get significantly large in a hurry is if it goes through multiple eyewall replacement cycles, and that will be pretty catastrophic for the wind speeds.
Marlene says, when is the worldwide animation coming out? I think we're now going to be waiting for Force 13 week to do that. And if you've not heard yet, by the way, we're doing a very special week of all the stuff that we've been doing over the course of our lifetime, I guess, the fun things and also informational pieces on hurricanes and documentaries and all that. A big week coming up at the end of November. We're also doing another charity stream again this year for storm victims like we did in 2020. That's going to be on December the 4th, Force 13's Force for Good. So please spread the word about that, because last year we did really well. Our first event raised over, I think it was $2,500 for international relief teams, and very important what they were doing in the aftermath of Eta and Iota in Central America. We've not decided yet what we're going to be putting it towards this year, but I'm sure there'll be something that we find. But that's to point you towards November, and that's when we think the worldwide animation's gonna appear. How many storms make landfall in Bermuda, says Alexia?
Not very many. Not very many at all.
All right.
Although there have been a lot of hurricanes in Bermuda. It's just very hard to make an actual center landfall at this very small island.
Most often what happens is the storm will go near enough to bring tropical storm winds, but it's rare we can get hurricane conditions from a storm. There have been people there for so long that we've had quite a few significant ones go through over the many centuries, but there haven't been that many direct hits or near misses.
I can't think of what the worst storm for Bermuda ever was.
2014 was a bad year for Bermuda.
2014 had two one make landfall and one had the eye come over part of the island, but the centre remained just offshore.
Yeah, not worst ever though.
I think the worst might have been I know what it is, but I can't remember.
According to what I just typed into Google, it's saying Fabian.
I was thinking that.
Yeah. It's the strongest to hit Bermuda since Arlene of 63.
Ah.
So
Bermuda has very well.
Oh yeah,
bolt
it looks like
don't take lots of
it's
damage.
Fabian of 03.
It's certainly up there. Let's see what else we have right now. What is Hurricane Sam's wind peak in the next 3 days?
We don't
Around
really
about
know,
what it's doing now.
We don't know.
but all I can say is the conditions are gonna be very favorable. They're not significantly changing. I looked at the upper level environment myself, and I thought it looked very good with extensive outflow, and you can see on the storm that the outflow is very impressive, not being restricted on any side, and the storm remains relatively compact. So if the storm doesn't expand in size and becomes very broad, which it doesn't appear to, we could be seeing a very strong intensity with this one.
Yes, it's not impossible for it to get to Category 5, but personally, I expect it to peak as a Category 4, whether that be 145, 150, or maybe 155, which is stronger than it is now. That would be some slight increase in intensity. I personally don't expect it to strengthen much, if any, from this point on. Sort of hold intensity and then go through an iron replacement cycle and never fully recover to the same wind speed. It might have a lower pressure, but the wind speeds aren't likely to get a lot higher than they are right now, and that's primarily because it's quite close to the maximum potential intensity in the environment, not thermodynamically, because the sea surface temperatures and oceanic heat content are there to support a significant Category 5, but I don't think the humidity is quite high enough to allow it to keep a core solid enough to go that high. I think the dry air is going to start seeping in once it gets to a certain point, as may have already happened as over the last few hours, and just bring it down a peg before it gets to full speed.
Where is the outflow going on, Sam? Which way is it going?
Quite a few
Always.
directions. It's sort of
It's
appears
going
to be-
everywhere.
Yeah, it's going everywhere in the local perspective. I'm not quite sure where it's going in the big perspective, but it's not producing that much because it's a very small storm.
The
Alright, yeah.
outflow is radially expanding outward, how it should be in a perfect sense. So we have on no side anything that restricts the outflow.
Which means, because the NHC did release their new tropical weather outlook about nearly 10 minutes ago, although it wasn't mentioned, there is a new AOI in the Atlantic, right in between the now 060, if it wasn't 060 already, at 2 p.m., and Peter's remnants remain 1020. This new AOI is at 1020. 020. So I guess you can say the wave train is on yet again.
Well, this isn't actually going to be a wave. The NHC says that they expect a area of low pressure to develop in the tropical Atlantic and not come from any wave, and they expect it to form west of the wave that's currently over Africa, between Sam and the AOI. So we were just talking about how there isn't really going to be the opportunity for two new names, but lo and behold, something has appeared to spite us.
When did we say that? I think there is.
Earlier on in the stream, we said there was potential for one more name from the AOI if it formed it in time.
Oh, in September, you mean?
In September, yes.
Right, okay, yep.
Before the end of the month. But apparently now there's a second system which, if it develops quick enough, could do something.
Yep. And as well, in that same time period, the eye drop sun came in. 946 at the pressure was the pressure at surface with a 16 knot wind, so that's about like a 945, 944.
It's been a while since I've looked at the National Hurricane Center's tropical weather outlook, and I'm somewhat surprised to see that the remnants of Peter are still there at 20% as well.
Well, Odette's remnants were there originally peaked
Oh
like a
yeah.
couple days ago, and they peaked at 6060. I mean, that AOI is now gone, but it's still being tracked on ATCF for some reason.
Yeah, it's still there. We mentioned it.
So, this the very impressive gust that was observed in the drop sond.
Hmm.
Andy Hazelton, a scientist working with the within the scope of NOAA and related to the National Hurricane Center, pulled up the data on an internal software and has found that the drop sond, which normally falls at a speed of 10 meters per second, was actually moving upwards at 6 meters per second when it recorded that wind gust,
Right.
which indicates an
Wow.
incredibly strong mesovortex.
Wow. Yes. That certainly sounds like it. Another question: is there anything behind Typhoon Mindulle? Not immediately.
Eventually, there will be
Not-
something.
And let's just take another look at that right now, if we can. That'll look
Certainly
here.
would like to. What's it been doing?
Intensifying, probably.
What's very
Still going
impressive.
for it.
Well, again, when the imagery has to reload every time I load it. It does show the latest imagery when it does appear, but it can take a while. So in the meantime, we're looking at the wide shot of the Atlantic there and all of its features. Very interesting basin at this time of year, I think we can all agree. Let's have a tiny look at the East Pack whilst we're waiting. Well, there it is right now. Not much going on there, so I guess we'll leave that.
That's
Models
been the story of September.
do
Only
indicate
really one
something.
system.
Yes. Here is Mindulle right now. We've only got one frame at the moment. It's loading up slowly but surely. But you can quite clearly see how it's been progressing and its eye getting clearer, I think, over time. By the end of today, I reckon, local time, it could be on the brink of Category 5 status if it intensifies as we expect.
Oh,
But-
I think it's gonna be sooner. I think it's gonna be Cat 5. I think it should be around Cat 5 in about 6 hours or less. But
Please don't.
by the look it has
Nah.
a very deep
Nah.
ring of convection, and you see the eye clearing. I mean, when you take a look at similar systems, often when they looked about this, they found 130, 135 knots, or even more.
I
It
don't
wouldn't be
know.
surprised.
It needs to. It still looks a bit too ragged to me. Not just the eye, but the eye wall, northern side. Needs to see a lot more blowing up.
Or
I'd
at least
feel.
get smoother in its appearance. Yeah.
And just looking at visible. Well, no, there's water vapor first, and the visible. Fantastic visible imagery there.
Just want to point out, recon in Sam may have hit quite some turbulence.
Yeah, it's to be
Um,
inspected in a small storm with intense mesovortex. Because,
Yeah.
of course, the other thing is, while they were going through that mesovortex to drop the drop sond into it, they would have been at the upper part of that and being affected by it as well.
Yeah, I'm
What
seeing
did
here
you
in
say had happened?
I'm seeing here that in internal talks, their altitude has fluctuated by like at least 500 meters from 3125 down to almost 2688 meters in altitude.
That's a lot.
So over 400 meters.
Yeah, nearly
That's-
500.
That is a
quite.
very impressive amount of turbulence.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. A question here: is the Sahara dust weakening Sam just a little bit, or not? What is the source of the dry air?
It is coming from the Sahara, as always, from the North Atlantic, and there is quite a bit of Saharan dust surrounding the storm. It's sort of a island of moisture amidst a desert of dry air, a desert from the desert. but it's not the dust itself that weakens the storm, it's the dry air that comes with the dust. But I am pretty confident that some dry air has snuck into it. However, in the very latest frames, the northern and western side looks the best it has since it opened up. On infrared, that is, it's still very much closed at the surface.
Yep, I agree. Looking good on your imagery there. Definitely category 4. We've got 10 more minutes to run here. If you have any more questions for us, if you've just joined us, the 2 top stories right now are Hurricane Sam, which is on your screen in the central Atlantic Ocean. Winds of 140 miles per hour sustained. Pressure 943 millibars. Recon planes are in the storm right now.
And they suggested the pressure was slightly higher, but that the winds were also higher. We've got pretty conclusive evidence for at least 145, most likely 150, and a pressure of 944.
And the forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center taking it northwestwards. In a big line there, major hurricane status for the whole 5-day period. In the Western Pacific, that's where our other big story is right now. Mindulle, which is last we had it was a Category 3. Our next Force 13 fix will be out soon. Kay, what are you thinking for it?
It's definitely a Category 4. We're deciding between 130 miles an hour or 140. But we're not going to be going much higher than a lower end Category 4 right now. That may change, of course, when the 0Z fixes and estimates from the official agencies are released. And in a few hours, when the Joint Typhoon Warning Center issues their public update, there may be a further increase from that.
It's stalled right now on the imagery. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I noticed that earlier. It moved 0.1 of a degree in 3 hours. I was quite surprised when I had to make that fix.
So
very unusual for it to be developing so much while not moving at all.
Yes. Let's see if we've got some questions then. What surface winds have Recon found in Sam?
145 to 150 with higher gusts, obviously.
So they have estimated the surface winds with SFMR at at around 160 miles per hour, but you don't just take the raw SFMR, you blend it with the flight level reduction, which is a bit lower than 150 miles an hour, and you arrive at a value that is roughly 150 miles an hour for Hurricane Sam.
And of course, the SFMRs are only 10 seconds rather than 1 minute, and they also become inflated when you get to very high wind speeds, such as this storm.
Yeah, flight level wind is also 10 seconds. You can assume that when the flight level wind is sustaining 10 seconds on the plane, which is moving through the storm, it also sustained for about 1 minute at the point it was measured. At one point it was measured, not the moving of the plane.
Yeah, it works out. It's a bit of a bit of advanced maths, but it does work out.
As it always is. Will Typhoon Mindulle hit Japan?
There's an outside chance it brings more significant conditions to Japan, and it would be passing nearest to Tokyo and that southeastern part of the main island. But besides a few coral reefs, there shouldn't really be, at this time, we're not expecting significant impacts.
I don't know yet, though.
Change.
It's going to be huge.
The same as Sam, it's not certain.
It's going to be huge with an enormous scale force wind field. Tropical storm force winds will hit the mainland of Japan, no doubt. I'm pretty sure on that.
Well, even so, that's a normal, relatively
Sure.
Not unusual weather.
Of course. And let's see what else we have. Are Rose's remnants still alive? I would say so. Not doing much, but still alive. Will Sam impact the east coast of the US or Atlantic Canada? As we mentioned earlier on, Atlantic Canada looks... Well, we think it's likely, but the latest GFS ensembles taking it, half of them taking it out completely to sea. And
Well, you can say that that impacts in Atlantic Canada about very much so more likely than on the U.S. East Coast.
And James wants to know, where did you find the 207 gust from?
Drop zone in the northern eyewall, I think, and this gust was at height. I think it's about 910 millibars up in the atmosphere, and it was recorded in a mesovortex, an extremely strong mesovortex, which had a very intense updraft. Usually, as Kay mentioned before, drop zones are falling down at about 10 meters per second, and this drop zone was temporarily moving upwards at 6 meters per second during the passage through this extremely strong updraft mesovortex, which has this gust recorded. So the gust is not part of the sustained winds of this storm, and it is not part of the broader circulation of the storm, just a very intense vortex inside the broader vortex.
Well, we're pretty much at the end of our discussion here, but before we go, guys, I must mention the short life of Teresa. I think there's some discussion within our quarters as to whether it was even a nameable cyclone or not. Your thoughts?
I don't even know what to think on Teresa.
Teresa was absolutely a subtropical storm when it was designated. It didn't last very long at all, but it was definitely deserving of a name at the point that it was named. Some people say there must have been fronts near it because it looked dreadful just afterwards, but there weren't any fronts near it. The NHC doesn't name fronts. A couple of other agencies have dabbled with that sport over the years, but the NHC is not one of them, in my opinion. There was a clear and well-defined low-level circulation and deep convection with satellite-confirmed winds of 35 to 40 knots, 40 to 45 miles an hour. It's definitely deserving of a name. No doubt about it in my mind.
And it was also clearly subtropical as it has been associated with a upper level low, and when you have so-called positive PV anomaly, which is potential vorticity. So positive PV is cyclonic rotation in the upper levels of convective activity that is also associated with convection in the lower levels. You have more of a subtropical cyclone than a tropical cyclone. Tropical cyclone has a high pressure anomaly in the upper levels where it transports the outflow away, and that wasn't the thing with Teresa. So it was clearly a subtropical cyclone that was deserving the name because of well-defined low-level circulation.
All right, thank you very much, team, for joining me in this coverage over the last 2 hours. It's been a pleasure once again. Unfortunately, I can't say goodbye to the viewers with my face because the webcam stopped working as we went live, as it has done many times. I really need to get that looked at. But nonetheless, that's all from us for now. Of course, we'll have more updates on these systems over the coming few days, beginning straight away with a tropical weather bulletin from Xavier. You'll get his take on what's going on around the world right now, with more storm updates likely for these two storms and everything else that's notable out in the wide world of tropics. From us at Force 13 HQ, that's it from here. Sam's intensifying, we think. Mindulle definitely is, and they're both very ferocious tropical cyclones. Good night.